So today on Now and Zen we have Brock Benzel, who's in the group Invalids. Is it Invalids?
Yep, invalids.
Awesome. And they've been posting uh, microtonal videos on Instagram and YouTube using the Lumatone and sometimes effects pedals. So, what inspired you to get a Lumatone?
So I've been into microtonal music, Zen harmonic music for a little longer than I guess what my, presence on the internet would entail, or suggest rather. Um, and I've sort of always wanted something like this. I've always wanted a tool to express that sort of thing. Ever since I discovered, you know, a higher resolution of pitch. Um, my whole life, I've been very ear training motivated once it occurred to me that that was a thing. Um, and so really, as soon as the Lumatone existed, I kind of I had to get on it. um, and so, I got it in on like the first pre-order batch. And, it kind of started with in college when I got into microtonal music. I had never really heard a term for it, um, but there was a course at school called microtonal grooves, and that was like an ensemble run by fabulous guitar player David Fusinski. And so I joined that ensemble because I simply didn't know what microtonal was. I saw the word and was like, well, that sounds cool. I gotta check that out. Um, and then Dave Fuzinski kind of got me into a lot of that stuff. Um, Opened my mind to sort of different things, and then I dug around myself um, to kind of expand. But the thing we were doing though, a lot of it was in like 24 tone. Um, it was a lot of like it, I mean, he played a fretless guitar, which allowed for a lot more expressive pitch control, right? And a higher resolution of expressive pitch. Um, but I was kind of stuck playing a keyboard, like a normal keyboard, and then another one that was tuned 50 cents sharp. And so I kind of had this split keyboard sort of setup that was very challenging to wrangle, but sort of cut my teeth on that for a little while. And
Yeah, it absolutely doesn't feel like playing just a normal keyboard where everything is in a row at all.
yeah, it's which I kind of liked because I love challenges. I love things that are atypical. Stuff that's a little harder to figure out tends to be my default. And so being kind of put in a situation where not only do I have to play an instrument that is split in half, but I also have to sound good and be an artist and make a sound that I feel is my voice, uh, to kind of hang with that gig. Because it kind of turned into like it started as a class, and then after the class was done, he asked me to kind of join his band. Um, and so I kind of just kept playing with his sort of microtonal ensemble. Started doing gigs, started doing a lot of clinics. I'm very grateful because we had the opportunity to perform with a lot of very high caliber musicians, both kind of microtonalists and not. We did a few gigs with Philip Gerschlauer. We did a few gigs with Mono Neon. Um, he gave us the opportunity to play with some amazing drummers. We played with like Jack DeJohnette and like Jojo Mayer,
Wow,
Michael Leona.
that's so
Crazy.
intense. Do you, have any stories from working with any of those musicians?
Uh, Yeah, I mean, they're all very unique and different and just interesting, and they all have their own sound. And I tell you what, it was very stressful to, like I said, play like a split instrument and then also try to sound like myself, right? To try to sound like my truest voice and to trust my ear and to play what I think is the best sound with what's happening around me. And now, like I mentioned, I default to kind of more abstract things, more kind of dense things. Uh, and so my improvisatory vocabulary tends to be kind of out there for a lot of people. Um, and luckily, a lot of those, very high caliber musicians, they're sort of down with that. And so I remember one of the best feelings I've had improvising was when we played with Mark Juliana or playing one of his tunes. Um, and he was kind of trying to feel out the vibe of everyone in the band to see like what they could handle, what their kind of vocab was, what they were ready for. Uh, and he sort of gave this caveat that was like when he takes his kind of his solo, uh, he's gonna go kind of far out, and to kind of like keep that in mind. And for me personally, that's my comfort zone. I love when things go far out. And so, when it came my turn to kind of take a round, um, I started kind of going out and doing my thing with it. And he just followed me right there, like immediately, and was just right on it. And it just felt like a different plane of musicianship that I had not really experienced as much prior. Um, which, that's what it's all about to me, is that getting into that abstract where it's pure music. And, um, but yeah, lots of varied experiences. I mean, playing with Mono Neon was a trip. Uh, his vocabulary is just astounding. It's really great when he just kind of does his thing. Um, but yeah, so I don't know. Every musician we get the chance to play with is just like a complete eye-opening experience.
Yeah, everyone really has their own individual approach, and with microtonality, it really gets to shine a lot. Do you think that being drawn to things that are abstract and dense is sort of what's drawn you into Zia's work, like playing her piano pieces on Lumatone?
Yeah, so Z is a good friend of mine, and I love her music, and I think that part of what kind of drew me to her sound and to what she makes is very much tied to my ethos with regards to making music, with regards to microtonal music, with regards to playing instruments like the Lumatone. And I'm very music first. If there isn't a sound and it doesn't sound good, I'm probably not that interested in it. um, there's only so much, discourse I can handle without listening, um, personally, and that's a line I draw. I mean, intellectually, I find it very stimulating and very interesting, um, but I'm also very stubborn, and so I want the music first, and I feel like Z kind of gives the music first most of the time, and it's good. Um,
And she's a brilliant theorist, which is unusual, I think. Like the order of that is
right.
unusual.
There's usually, it's either you've got the music sauce and don't really dabble as much in the theory, or there's a lot of theory sauce and not enough music to back it up. But but I feel like she's got kind of, the best of both, which is that the music comes first and that she can explain everything that's happening, which is, personally how I try to exist in this world myself. Um, and I think her music was some of my first exposure to different types of tuning systems beyond like 24 and other ones that I had personally experimented with. Because at that time, I was mostly working in 24, wrapping my head around that, getting into that, varying that in small ways. And then at some point, started experimenting with different, like, EDOs and just various other tunings. Um, but again, at the time, all on, a 12 layout keyboard, which, as I'm sure you know, is not always the most inspiring endeavor. But when I first heard, I think the tune was Prayer Room was the first one I heard in 31. That kind of blew my mind because I had never really explored super deep into other tunings, things like just intonation as well, prime modality and all that. Um, but yeah, so the the sort of piano pieces, the etudes that she's been working on have been very inspiring to me. Um, because they're just sort of they're beautiful for one. They all have a very distinct character. They all have a very clear line to extend one's ear training that I think sounds great whether you know about microtonal music or not. And also the challenge of it. They're sort of not meant to be played, and for me, that makes them more enticing.
Perfect.
As a performer, I love performing things that are a little bit extra or a little bit kind of outside the sphere of sort of general plausibility. That's very appealing to me um, on a physical level. So, you know,
Yes.
I I I could say infinite good things about Z.
So how did you practice those piano etudes then? Did you write anything down? Did you just like memorize it chord by chord? Like, what was kind of your process for that? Did it take a long time?
So it didn't take very long. It's more the length of time is only however much free time I have. But if I had free time all day, I would probably bust it out in like a day or two. But it's sort of like limited to what time I can find to spend on it. Um, I find the Lumatone specifically, and other instruments as well, but the Lumatone very much so is a hyper specific physical sensation that a certain harmony or a certain stretch or a certain feeling feels an exact precise way. And so my entire life, I found it much easier to remember things that don't repeat, to remember things that have a very distinct way they exist and, a sort of order that things happen. Um, so her pieces, in the nature that they don't repeat, but they're also somewhat short, um, makes it a lot easier for me to kind of just remember everything that's happening and to hear everything that's happening. That's kind of the main thing. I hear it all, and so, uh, but I also read sheet music. The very first thing I ever learned how to do on the piano was read sheet music, and so um, I spent years and years of my life just like reading stuff, sight reading stuff. And so that element is very helpful and makes it way easier. And so I've been adapting lately to reading in 31 and kind of it's not as hard as I thought it would be. But
Yeah,
there there's a very specific feeling though, and everything I play on the Lumatone, um, I can feel in my hands when it is exactly perfect. Um, the keys are small enough that you have to be precise enough that a certain stretch, it's like a muscle memory for like hand shapes in a way that I personally find I feel more in my palms and my sort of joints than in I don't know how you would typically feel out piano voicings. Um,
that's a very good description. Yeah, because I feel like with piano, a lot of what you're feeling is in the end of the fingers and in the lumatone, because of all the different configurations you can have. Your hand ends up taking some pretty strange shapes sometimes, even to get things that would be considered normal chords in a certain environment. Mike Battaglia helpfully pointed out that some shapes have a finger almost tucked under,
mhm.
and so it is a really odd feeling. I also personally find it extremely different than piano playing. Um, it's good to hear your thoughts on the Lumatone. And you wrote a few pieces yourself as well on the Lumatone, correct?
Yeah, so lately I've been writing a lot of kind of sketches and not necessarily fully realized tunes. That's sort of on my to-do list. Um, but yeah, I've been writing. It's hard not to. I'm the sort of player where I don't I usually don't want to play other people's music very often.
Right.
Z is an exception. Um, but when I sit down at the Lumatone, it's almost exclusively just pure composition, and exploration and, ear training.
Yeah.
Um, so I have a lot of ideas. I have an ensemble that I'm putting together
Yeah.
to make, a more realized, microtonal and harmonics type of band. Um, so that's on the horizon, hopefully sooner than later.
Fingers crossed.
I've got some players who have the open-mindedness and the open ears to go where I want to go. It'll take a little bit of training probably just to get everybody on the same page. But I have some people who are ready for that sort of thing, and I'm really looking forward to it. There's definitely, I don't know, the Lumatone inspires me to make different sound, and the tuning inspires me to make a different sort of vibe than all the other music I make. So it should
Yeah.
be fun.
How do you write using music theory principles and the Lumitone? Like, do you have any sort of processes for coming up with chords, melodies, things like that?
So I'm extremely obsessed with harmony, on any level and in any tuning on any instrument. It's one of my favorite things. And so there's kind of, especially rich harmony, coming from the piano, playing things like jazz, avant-garde, exposed me to quite a bit of different harmony and sort of approaches to harmony. So I translate a lot of those ideas over into the Lumatone. Um, the thing that I spend the most time on when I'm practicing the Lumatone and I'm composing, or I'm working through something that I hear, is really kind of auditioning every variation. Because the tuning system is a high resolution to what I've been working on in the past. Um, I really take the time to let my ear wander around that high resolution to feel, okay, I know I've got this general sound in my ear, um, but can I dig for the higher resolution of what I'm really hearing? Can I find that, does this note need to be slightly sharper, slightly flatter? Does that note need to be slightly sharper, flatter? Is the whole relationship slightly closer to the harmony before it or slightly farther away? Um, so I spend a lot of the time outside. Usually the idea is very quick to me. It's very clear. It's like, okay, I want this progression or this harmony or this, sequence of harmonies, or this melodic contour. Those things, the compositional sort of elements at their core, are very, I feel very solid with those and very comfortable. But then taking the time to really dig that resolution, is where I spend the absolute most time, and it often slows the process down quite a bit. But once I've gotten more familiar with it, I find a more thorough enjoyment or a more thorough sort of depth to the sound. Um, so uh, there's definitely a lot of kind of more advanced harmony sounds that I'm just ready for. I just know what they are, and I know what I want to do with them. But then sometimes I find one that is, off the grid, so to speak, with my previous experience, and those are the ones that I'm hunting. I love that sound, and I love finding a new sound and figuring out what to do with it. Where can I put it? How can I contextualize it? What emotion does it invoke? Um, and so I spend a lot of time doing that. Uh, I find it to be more physically, concretely rewarding than if everything I did was, based on a theoretical template or a theoretical idea that I had already studied on paper. Um, as I alluded earlier, I'm very music first, but I do love theory, and I do feel like I have a deep sort of relationship with theory. Um, so often I will, it's kind of 50-50. I'll go into it understanding what I'm doing, and then I also am ready for and expect, um, you know, to have my expectations subverted. I think that's the most fun, is to have the rug pulled from under me, and now I have to adapt to something.
That
Um,
sounds a lot like what I do. Generally, if I try to find those new chords where they surprise me, sometimes I'll try finding that on my own when the system is set up, and sometimes I'll try thinking of intervals that add up in a way where the relationships, when they're translated into 12th unequal temperament, can either have too many interpretations or not a logical interpretation. And so that doesn't really dictate the type of scale that might be used, but just maybe a particular harmony or a particular sequence of notes that would accomplish that sort of feeling. Do you play in any equal temperaments besides 31 on the Lumatone so far?
I've also tried 53. I've written a few things in 53. Um, I have a bit of a I don't you may have noticed this in my videos that I use a variety of layouts sometimes color
Yes.
wise. That's a little bit of chaos. So I I think it's kind of fun to to have a little bit of ambiguity to what's happening. Uh, to trust the ear more than the text on the internet or wherever. Um, I don't really participate very much in like tuning discourse, and so I tend to just kind of mess with the colors as I like them. And while I do a lot in 31, sometimes I do 53. Sometimes if you're just looking at it, you won't be able to tell the difference. And so it's all in the ears. Um, because I like to meddle. But 53 is awesome. It's got a very high resolution that I haven't really listened past 53 very often because it's very thorough for where my ears are at. And I do like it a lot. It's stretchier physically because you have less variation. I mean, in 31, I could play the same note in two spots most of the time, which helps quite a lot for different unique voicings and stretches and hand positions. Which I like wide harmony. I like being stretchy. So 53 is also a great one that I'll probably be doing more with at some point.
Yeah. Would you say you generally enjoy tunings that are close to JI and or use perfect fifths?
Yeah, I tend to value JI. It's very it's very trance like for me when I fall into the JI realm of a tuning. I find it very I don't know, it's calming, it's very concordant, it's a different flavor from you know tunings that don't do that. So I do like that approximation most of the time, and there's some really distinct sounds that I wouldn't be able to get any other way. um Fifths too are pretty handy depending on what I'm doing. I like low fifths um, for a lot of kind of wider structures, but in general, I also tend to leave out fifths in a lot of what I do, um, unless I want like a thicker sound. Uh,
Hmm.
so the fifths are less of a huge factor for me, but it's a tool. It's there.
Absolutely. Is there any exciting news about this microtonal ensemble around the corner?
So I'm kind of waiting right now for my bassist to get a fretless bass. He's having one built. Um, I've been, composing sketches, ideas. I find every time I sit down, I come up with a new idea, and
Hmm.
so it's there's going to be more and more material. I have a drummer who is very, very open-minded and a very chameleon-esque musician who can kind of adapt to a lot of scenarios. Um,
Yeah.
I can't really say too much specifically because we don't have a lot of the concrete stuff planned. Um, but I'm very the vocabulary that's inspiring me is a lot of kind of dark ballad-esque type material, but also uh, high energy kind of uh, maybe drum and bass style energy, kind of. I hate to use the term, but like IDM type vibes.
Oh,
Uh,
right. Yeah.
it's not the best. I don't know if there's an alternative for that, but
Yeah, I don't know. It does seem kind of like I guess people sometimes I think when they're describing music also think this way about the word interesting, like if IDM is just like intelligent dance music, um, you know, and it's like they're very sensitive to the idea that anything else is unintelligent and thus pejorative.
Right, right.
And so, like, taken to its logical conclusion, it can seem very insulting. Um,
Right.
and I think people will just always do that. So then it becomes difficult to name things in such a way that it still conveys, like, the idea that it takes more mental effort to process this music and understand the pattern and, like, parse it without insulting music that is not that and creating that binary.
I find that I think the truth of it should also be that if you find a sound, you should just call it what you want to call it. It's very easy to get roped into the thing people call it, so to say.
Oh, yes.
Um, I was talking to Z about this the other day, actually, where it's the same with theory. If you find a sound, someone somewhere on some internet forum probably called it something.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
and do they have good music to back it up? Probably not. And so if you find the same thing, call it what you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Not only for the personal utility and the personal relationship with that material, but you know, to make music with it is very it's very intrinsically tied to however you experience that phenomenon. Um, so maybe I should just come up with my own name for it.
Absolutely. And I also think that it's really difficult to come up with rules for writing music that are effective as theory. It seems a bit strange because when you learn music theory, at least at a Western university, or at first you're learning about, how chord progressions from the common practice period worked. And then afterwards, there's a lot of like electroacoustic stuff when you break free from that. Um, there's not really prescribed rules for particular, I don't know, like styles where people try to go outside the norm. And it almost feels like creating rules for avant-garde situations is like it kind of defeats the purpose, but not exactly. I think sometimes people create theory rules without understanding this. And so they just create rules that like they would like to see in music that exists, but maybe they wouldn't want to actually create that themselves according to those rules. Because at least, I don't know, in my mind, rules are sometimes there to be broken. And so personally, I try to write things that can't be described by rules easily on purpose.
Right. I mean, I find the concept of rules, I usually don't think of it like rules. I think of it more like expectations.
Yeah.
A rule creates an expectation, which is only begging to be subverted
Yes.
most of the
Yes.
time, right?
Exactly.
And so, I think that there's extreme value in limitations and sort of setting limitations as a means of curating that. I think rules being introduced as a means of creating expectation, furthermore, um, setting limitations on one's own tools or vocabulary or situation, um, that sort of begs to be subverted itself. And so, that's why I find a lot of artists, they find their sound and it seems like a limitation, but really it's like that's the answer to limitation. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, there's a lot of people drawing rule sets out there as sort of what seems like a projection of what they might want to hear or what they think should work in theory. Um, and in my opinion, that's theory music. I like music theory where the music comes first, and then the
Ah, I
theory
see.
can come after. The semantics of that are debatable, but
Of course.
um, you know, I would rather the music sound good first, and then if it can be explained, beautiful, and I love it, and I'm into it. And if it's hard to explain, that's just the way it goes.
Yep.
you know.
There you
Um,
go. If you don't mind, I think I'm gonna listen to your one of your pieces again that you played with the Lumatone on YouTube, so that we can talk briefly about the intervals. Oh, your Lumatone piece that you wrote yourself is not actually on. YouTube. I'm guessing it's on Facebook instead.
Right. I have a bit of a stubborn, frustrated relationship with YouTube.
Ah, I see. Yeah. Oh, because you did stuff with the Ludwig or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
That's interesting. Let's see. Ooh, excuse me. Okay, let me see if I can find the video.
There is a longer composition to that clip that I didn't include in that full video, but that's just sort of a taste of it as I'm sort of acclimating my hands to the instrument. But yeah, finding that kind of more harmonic sound for that moment and just sort of sitting there because that's the first time I could feel that in my hands on a keyboard, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I'm
a
just
very lovely, lovely feeling.
I'm just immediately struck by how, if this is your first time at the Lumatone, how you're coming up with something that I think feels really innovative and a little bit out there because you're using quite a few of the different colors of keys to access some strange places. Not like premeditated, but like still, it's not just like a few chords back and forth that could be played in 12 tone equal temperament. Um,
Right. I love the depth of something like a tuning system with this resolution, and so I feel like using the tools available to me um, can achieve a lot in a way that might be subversive to someone who knows how to play in that tuning system, but then to the ear sounds natural, right?
yeah,
And there are ideas built off of things that you could translate to a 12 tone keyboard. Um, modes of harmonic minor, melodic minor, if you want to, kind of put them in little boxes. The fluidity of it, the sort of shifting nature of it is sort of always on my mind. Um,
yeah,
as I alluded to earlier, I'm not a big fan of repetition. So things that are ever evolving, that are ever shifting in color, in texture, in kind of, an interval that was once one way might be another way the next time. I crave that sort of feeling.
yeah. I also noticed that in your work, I'm watching the one that says "Stay hydrated." It looks like that one's in 53. You you're accessing intervals that are not as diatonic as a lot of other players, so your hands wouldn't be like in a line, but a lot of your hand motion is like sideways, so you can reach those other strange intervals. Is that kind of would that be a correct assessment of what's going on? You'd say?
Absolutely, absolutely. I love phasing in and out of diatonicism, accessing a full spectrum of harmony from different sort of places. That's sort of one of the reasons why I love harmony is how fluid it is and how dynamic it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for talking with me today. I'm gonna have to get going to my next thing, but I'm looking forward to posting this on June 30th. Happy Pride.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Only much more to come musically. Um, hopefully the next time we speak, I'll have some some full songs out there. Some
Yeah, yeah, of course. Well, I will see you later then. Have a good one.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Bye bye.